you guys, happy Monday. I hope you had a good Easter break. I hope it was relaxing and fun and you stayed safe and healthy. We're ready for school and we are on the last lesson of module 13. So this whole module has been about fractions and describing equal parts of a whole, representing and naming unit fractions, which is just one piece of each part of the whole. We learned how to represent and name fractions of a whole, and then we did fractions on a number line, which is going to be especially helpful for today's lesson, and you'll see why. We expressed whole numbers as fractions, so we could say, you know, these whole groups, if they're divided into fourths, we could have 8 fourths, and so the numerator would be 8 and the denominator would still be 4, and that would represent the whole number 2 because there were 2 whole groups. And then we did naming fractions that are greater than 1. So it's been a lot. It's been very exciting. Now we're doing lesson 7 on page 377, using fractions to measure lengths. So our I can statement says I can measure lengths to the nearest half or fourth of an inch using a ruler. So if you have a ruler, get it out. I found this ruler. It's broken, but it'll still work because it starts with 0 right here, so that's perfect. Use your ruler if you have one. If you don't, that's okay. Just follow along because throughout the lesson, it'll give like a picture of a ruler and we'll just use that. So the reason that I said lesson 4 doing or naming fractions on a number line will be so helpful because I want you to treat our ruler like it's a number line. It has like all of our marks, 1 inch, 2 inch, and then there's lines in between. It's kind of see-through, so it might be hard. But there's lines in between that represent 1.5 inches or 2.5 inches, and that's how we mark it on our number lines as well. So kind of the same thing. So let's go ahead and get started. Our Spark Your Learning says Sia needs to measure the length of the carrots that she is growing for a science experiment. About how long is each of Sia's carrots? So when we use our ruler, we want to line up whatever we're measuring onto that first line. We're not going to line it up to the edge of the ruler because there's usually a little space between the first line and the edge of the ruler. So we want to line it up with the line, not the edge. So I'm going to take my ruler. It's kind of hard to hold both at the same time. So here I'm going to line up the line to the edge of the carrot. And I'm looking at that and I'm seeing, okay, that's 1 whole inch. And then it goes a little bit past the hole to about halfway. So that big line in between 1 and 2 inches, that marks 1/2. And you'll see it in between every inch. There's like one line that's longer than all of the rest. That marks 1/2. There's also quarter lines, which are these longer ones. They're not as long as the 1/2 inch line, but they're longer than like the skinny lines, or not the skinny lines, but the other shorter lines. So yeah, so this is 1/4 and 1/2, 3/4, and 1 whole inch. Okay, so this first carrot is about 1.5 inches. So I'm going to write it 1, remember our mixed numbers, where we have our whole number 1, and then 1/2, 1.5. Okay, and for the second carrot, line up the edge of the carrot to the first line on my ruler. So this looks like exactly 2 inches. So I'm just gonna do a whole 2. Okay, the next caret, the longest one, I'll line it all up nicely. Okay, so you can see we're going 1, 2, 3, a little bit past 3. It looks right on that half mark, and so it's 3.5 inches, about. So again, it's a mixed number, so we write our whole number and the fraction next to it, a little bit smaller. And then our last caret is, okay, so this one's a little bit trickier. So we are passing 1 inch, 2 inch. It's longer than 2.5. It looks like it's right lined up with the 3/4 mark, the 3/4. So 3/4 and 3/4 is the same thing. So 2, 2 1/4, 2.5, 2 3/4 long. Inches long. 2 3/4. Ta-da! All right, so the turn and talk says, how did you decide on a measurement when the length of the caret was between 2 markings on the ruler? So what did we decide? Well, we just want to be as close as possible, and the instructions were that we are going to measure lengths to the nearest half or fourth, and so those were the only lines that we were focusing on. There's lots of other tiny lines on there. We were just focused on the fourth, half, and 3/4. And 1/2 is the same as 2/4. So that's why we just say 1/2 instead of 2/4. But technically it's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So we just focus on those ones and find the nearest one. All right, next page, page 378. It says build understanding. Measure the length of a leaf. Use a ruler marked with 1/2 inches. So it has the ruler for us. Line up the left end of the leaf with the 0 mark on the ruler. So that's what I was saying before. That first line is the 0 line. We line it up to that first line, not the edge of the ruler. So our leaf is right here. It wants us to label the parts of the ruler. So it says that this ruler is marked with 1/2 inches. So we start, this is 0, and then halfway between 0 and 1 is 1/2. And I knew it was halfway because there are 2 sections in between 0 and 1. So if there's 2 sections, 2 equal parts, my denominator is going to be 2. Then we have 1, and then we have 1. Again, we're thinking in halves. 1.5. 2, 2.5. 3, 3.5. 4, 4.5. And then finally 5. So then we're going to line up our leaf to the 0 mark, and then it's a little bit over, but it's closer to the 2.5 than it is to the 3, and so we're gonna say 2.5. What length does the mark on the ruler between 1 and 2 show? How do you know? So that in between 1 and 2, oops, my pen is gonna roll off the table. In between 1 and 2 is going to be 1.5, and we talked about that right here. We know it's 1.5 because there are 2 equal sections between 1 and 2. These 2 equal sections, so our denominator is 2 because that's how many equal parts we have all together. So you would write that all down. I'm not going to write it down, but you will. Part C says label each of the other marks on the ruler with a fraction or a mixed number. Groovy, we already did that. Part D says, between which 2 marks does the right end of the leaf line up? So the right end of the leaf is between 2.5 and 3 inches. which we said before. We noticed that before. We were like, oh, it's a little bit past 2.5, but it's not quite to the 3. So which mark is closer to the right end of the leaf? It's closer to 2.5 inches than it is to 3 inches. So what is the length of the leaf to the nearest 1/2 inch? 2.5. Oh, I wrote 2 1/3 for some reason. Sometimes I do that. I think it's because I was saying it's closer to 2.5 than it is to 3. So I said 3, so I wrote it. So silly. What is the length of the leaf to the nearest 1/2 inch? 2.5. All right, the Turn and Talk says, how is a ruler like a number line? I was just talking about this. So our number line, or our ruler, is exactly like a number line. A number line is not always going to be measured exactly in 1/2 inches. We could draw a number line and it wouldn't have, we could say, oh, this is 1 and this is 1.5, and it wouldn't actually be an actual inch because we're just drawing a number line. But a ruler is definitely a number line, but it's just exact measurements, whereas a number line is not. So cool. All right, next page, the Step It Out. Number 2, it says, measure the length of this carrot to the nearest 1/4 or 1/4 inch. So again, like I said before, when we say a 1/4 or when we say a 1/4, those mean the same thing. So you might have heard me say, oh, 3/4 or 3/4. That means the same thing. And something cool, just kind of a side note with 1/4, how many quarters equal, if we're thinking about money, the money quarter, how many quarters equal a whole dollar? 4. So that's where that comes from. So neat, right? So anyways, it says line up the left end of the carrot with the 0 mark on the ruler. Okay, got it. Part B says the right end of the carrot is between, so let's see, it drew that line for us. So this ruler is marked, every 4th inch is marked. The other ruler was every 1/2 inch. So this one would be 3, because that's our whole number, 3 and 1/4. And then the next line would be 3 and 1/2, which is the same as 2/4. So you could say 1/2 or you could say 2/4. So it's in between 3 and 1/4 and 3 and 1/2 inches. Which 4th inch mark is closer to the right end of the carrot? So what is it closer to? Is it closer to 3 1/4 or 3 1/2 or 3 2/4? I'd say it's closer to 3 1/4, the 3 1/4 inch mark. That first little bitty line. The length of the carrot to the nearest 4th inch is 3 1/4. Easy peasy. Then the Turn and Talk for this one says, where is the 0 mark on the ruler, and how do you know? We talked about this. The 0 mark is the first line. That is 1, this is 0, not the edge of the ruler. So, over it had a little side note for you if you wanted to read that. It says, a ruler showing 4ths is like a number line that is divided into 4ths. So 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4 is the same as this ruler here. I'm trying to figure out the camera angles. There you go. Awesome. Okay, so now let's do our check understanding. Use a ruler marked with 1/2 inches. Measure. Well, all I have is this ruler, so since it says use a ruler with 1/2 inches marked, I'm going to assume that it wants us to find the length of it to the nearest half inch. So I'm not gonna worry about quarter inches or fourth inches. I'm just gonna worry about a whole inch and half inches. Okay, so I'm gonna line up too many things in my hands. Okay, I'm gonna line up this ruler with the stick. Again, we're lining up along the 0 line, not the edge of the ruler. So I'm looking at this, it's past 2 inches, and it's a little bit past 2.5, but it is closer to 2.5 than it is to 3 inches. So I'm gonna say that this is 2.5 inches. And I just wrote inches with it because we want to remember our units, but you could write inches as just IN period as an abbreviation. All right, on your own. We're cruising through this. Number 2, it says, Alma and Rex both measure the same pen. Alma says that the pen is about 5.5 inches long. Rex says the pen is about 5.25 inches long, 5.25. Can both students be correct? Okay, so let's think about this. Alma and Rex, they measure the same pen, like this. And they say, Alma says that it's about 5.5. Let's find 5.5 on our ruler. 5.5. Can you see that? 5.5. And Rex says that it's about 5.25. So let's take a look at this. Can both students be right? Well, gosh, 5.5 and 5.25 are so close. Look at that. I tried to mark it with a pen. See how close those dots are? 5.5 and 5.25 are awfully close. And they did not say that it was exactly 5.5. They said about 5.5. So yes, both students are correct, especially if Alma's ruler might be one where it's just, they just have the half inches marked, and Rex might have a ruler where they have the quarter inches marked. And so they're just, you know, being as close and accurate as they can. So you would write that all out. They can both be correct because those are very, very, very close together. All right, number 3, use a ruler marked with 1/4 inches for questions 3 to 5 and measure them. What is the length of the nut to the nearest 1/4 inch? Looks like an almond or something. So I am going to again take my ruler, line it up on the 0 line, and look at this. Okay, so I have, ooh, this one's a little bit of a tough one. So I have, it's greater than 1, greater than 1. I am gonna say that this one is 1 2/4 or 1.5. It's like right in between. Oh, wait. I'm looking at the, oh my gosh, I was looking at the wrong line. 1.5 is way over here. So this is definitely 1 1/4 inches. I was looking at these two, comparing these two lines instead of the actual half inch mark. So my bad. This is 1 1/4 inch. So I'm gonna write 1, this is a mixed number, 1 1/4 inch, like that. 1 1/4 inch. Now what is the length of the safety pin to the nearest half inch? Okay, so I line up my ruler to the safety pin. All right, so this wants me to go to the nearest half inch. So that's what I'm gonna focus on. I'm not gonna focus on the 1/4 inches, the 1/4 inches. So it's past 1, it's past 1.5 inches, but I am gonna say that it's closer to 1.5 inches than it is to 2 inches. Oof. I'm not sure. It looks really close. I think I'm going to change my mind actually. I think it's closer to the 2, especially if I adjust this a little bit and have it like exactly lined up on my 0 line. I'm going to say 2 inches. 2 inches. So I just have my whole 2 inches done. All right, and then it says draw a line that is 4 3/4 in 4 3/4 inches in length. Okay, so I'm gonna do this on my table because I can't hold the book and hold the ruler and draw a line all at the same time. So, but I'll walk you through what I'm doing. So I have my ruler. I'm just laying it down on my book, and I'm going to start the line at the 0 mark on my ruler, not at the edge of the ruler. And it's 4 3/4, so I'm gonna just draw along as best I can until I get to 4. Then I'm gonna stop, and then I'm gonna make sure I'm looking at the correct 1/4 inch marks, and I'm gonna count to 3/4. So 1/4, 2/4, which is the same as a half, and 3/4. So you can kind of see like this. And you can kind of see like how I drew it. I started here, stopped at 4, and then there's like little stop marks. That's 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So there's my line. All right. The learning mindset that you guys will fill out on your own. It says, how does using a ruler help me better understand measuring with fractions? Well, what do you guys think? How does that help you understand measuring with fractions? It's just like using a number line, but it's exactly measured out for inches and 1/4 inches. So you can be a little bit more accurate with your measurements if you know what each of those little marks represent and mean. So that's what I would write down. But you write your own. This is your learning mindset. Okay, that is all for Module 13. So crazy, we're just like flying through. We will do the Module 13 review tomorrow together, the review page, and then you'll take the Module 13 practice test by yourself. So, you have your math homework to do today, 13.7. So good luck with that, do your best, and that's all for today. Love your guts, bye.